Council, Mr. Metrick, could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Muterick?
Present.
Ms. Tevlin-Moffett?
Present.
Mr. Diaz? Ms. Richmond?
Here.
Mr. Cilio?
Present.
Mr. Wainwright?
Here.
Mr. Weisskort?
Here.
Mayor Grady?
Present.
Mr. Walko? Present.
Thank you. I'm going to defer any comments from myself at this time. I feel like we have a pretty meaty agenda ahead of us. I'm sure I'll have a lot to say. Mr. Mayor, do you have a report?
Yes, I do, Council President. My talk tonight is going to deal with and concern recent issues with regard to what occurred in the borough with regard to the permit process. Back on February 23rd of 2016, I sent an email to our borough manager directing him not to issue a permit until I had the opportunity to review it for safety reasons. I just learned this Friday that the permit was approved. I had not seen the approved permit before it was sent out. I had not been given any documents with regard to that permit. I had not had the opportunity to review that permit for safety reasons. I directed our borough manager to withdraw that permit immediately. He refused. I'm advised that he would not do it, and I'd like to address that issue with council tonight and our residents tonight. It is absolutely clear, you'll hear from Mr. Walker later tonight, that the mayor doesn't have a role in the permitting process. There isn't section sub B or sub C which says, hey, the mayor gets it now, gets a chance to decide what to do with it. That doesn't exist. It's not in the permitting code. It's not in the zoning code. But what we do have is a borough code. And under the borough code, the mayor is directed to maintain order in the borough and look after your public safety. I have issues with regard to that. We can fight over permitting with regard to whether it's the right thing to do to have the mayor involved in the permitting process, or we can fight over whether, what is the mayor's job? What is the mayor really supposed to do in the borough? A lot of people don't know. But I do know that why would you not err on the side of public safety? And that should be concerning, because that becomes more of a common sense issue. Even if I was wrong, why would you not give it to me for purposes of reviewing it before it went out? And it wasn't done. So I'm alerting our residents, I'm advising borough council, but I object to that type of procedure going through council at this point. There are a series of emails I'll mark as M1. I'll put these in the record. These are the emails between myself and our borough manager directing him to withdraw the permit. It has not been withdrawn. With regard to the process, we could argue all night long as far as who's right. But I firmly believe that we should have an opportunity, there should always be an opportunity for the mayor to review something before it gets approved and sent out by the borough. I'm not an engineer. I do know when there's a safety issue involved. And on the face of this document, I'm not going to impugn the contractor that's on the document, but I'll address how he describes his business to you. This is the person that is under the demolition, just to do demolition. Lightrum Landscapes is a small, fairly new organization in the landscape counseling and planning firms industry, located in Narberth, Pennsylvania. It opened its doors in 2011 and now has an estimated $69,000 in yearly revenue and 2 employees. On the face of that demolition application, I have some issues. I have some real issues with regard to it. I'm disappointed that my directive was not upheld by our borough manager. Because at the end of the day, the only person that's going to be standing in front of a microphone, God forbid something happens with regard to that demolition down there, is me. It's not going to be Mr. Yerkes. I don't know who Mr. Yerkes is. I don't know who else is going to stand up and take responsibility. But part of the job and part of the pact that I have with this borough is to take that responsibility and address matters. No one was happy with the left-hand turn, but it was necessary because it was a public safety measure to be taken. I think I'm the only person on the 4th of July that can't drink. It's amazing. Why? Because in the event I have to make sure that there's an event that happens, if the fires go off or it's pouring rain or something's happened, I'm going to respond. I'm responsible. I'm answerable. And part of my pact with the residents of this borough is to ensure your public safety and do my best to ensure that public safety. In this situation, that has not occurred. Thank you.
Thank you. As many of you know, we have rearranged our business meeting agenda to move public comment before much of the committee reporting and discussions. And I would like to say there's a number of motions here. Public comment, the question came to me via email. You can comment on anything you like. If you'd like to read poetry in your allotted time, you are entitled to do it. The goal of public comment, saying on items on the agenda, is to help us focus and get business done more effectively, not to exclude anybody from speaking. I would also suggest that you be aware that the form-based zoning code, that draft ordinance has been in discussion Wednesday night and may come up, although there is no agenda item at this point. You should feel free to address that. And with that, I'll start in the back left and with a sign of hands, and we'll have a 3-minute limit. Do we have a microphone for the public? Let's see. Thank you. When you come up, could state your name and address. That will help the court reporter, who is taking the minutes for this meeting, to be most effective.
My name is Kadir Cannon, 128 Woodside Avenue. I've come late into this process, and as I look in it, I don't think you know what you're doing. I mean, serious. On one hand, you're mixing apples and oranges. One side is the atrocity that happened on Dudley Street, which is setbacks or whatever. You should have been on that earlier anyway. The other is expanding the footprint of the zoning. And this is crazy. Nobody can go and figure it out. Even a person who knows zoning. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. And it looks to me that you're going to be expanding more development, more building, more lawsuits. It's just a crazy thing. And you don't know what you're doing. You say, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But you don't say what the baby is or there isn't a baby. This has to be done. Trust us. We're experts. You don't get anything.
Thank you. In that back row, Ms. Fox, do you have anything to add? I'll go all the way over the back row to the other side. Coming down the second row, Mr. Brower's row. All right, looks like sir in the white ball cap coming down your row. Same row. Mr. Spears. Georgette. Anyone? No? Okay. Ms. Bizak.
Sorry, I wasn't expecting it to be so fast. I gotta do it quick.
Take your time. I won't start the clock.
Okay, thank you. I'm like frantic. I wasn't expecting
It'll be
it to be
efficient, but not cool.
I know. Thank you.
My name is Kimberly Bizak. I'm at 237 Dudley. Okay, first, I would like to talk a bit about that there are some people that are calling into question a petition that I organized and are declaring that it has a secret agenda. I want to give you some background. This is really low, by the way.
Go ahead. Take your time.
So, since I was really young, I've always had a fascination with old buildings. I've just loved them for their historic value and what they bring to the community. This is an example of some sketches I did when I was really little. I was always fascinated with old buildings in Louisiana. This place is gone now. I sketched this when I was 15. Here's another one that I sketched when I was 13. And my daughter is following in my footsteps. This is her version of Elmwood Church. I'm 4 years old. I'm gonna sit. This microphone's way too loud. Sorry. Okay.
Raise it up.
So with that said, since last June, I've been fighting to save homes in Narberth. I've been attending meetings, I've been presenting information I've found, and I've been urging council to explore how to curb demolitions. In my opinion, no matter how slim of a possibility it is, in my eyes, the Form-based zoning code is our last chance to save the Elmwood Church. And for anyone to suggest that I have motives beyond saving the church, I'm really heartbroken. So I just wanted to address that. Thank you. With in addition to that, I would just like to update council on a petition that each of you are a recipient of, as well as Mr. Gordon. We now have 309 supporters. The petition action says, we, the undersigned, urge Narberth Borough Council to pass a version of form-based zoning code that allows our former civic institutional buildings to be used for limited commercial purposes by establishing a conditional use process to ensure that such uses are compatible with the surrounding area and that the historic character of such buildings is preserved. We ask Mr. Gordon to be patient while Borough Council works collaboratively to pass form-based code.
Is that it?
Round of time.
20 seconds.
Yes, that's it then.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Coming down this row. Yes. Our AV people will, I meant Charlie.
Charlie's the AV guy. That's right.
Yeah, right.
I'm Richards. I live at 531 Dudley Avenue. And I'm making two assumptions, and correct me if I'm wrong. My assumption is that the form-based code would prevent a garage from being doubled in size and made into 2 stories. Is that accurate?
The current draft limits a garage to 16 feet high, 1 story.
Thank you.
All accessory buildings, right?
All accessory,
1 story.
Okay. And my other assumption is that the house on Dudley Avenue, next to the Whitties, under the new code, would have been required to maintain an 8-foot distance back from the property line and would not be smack up against the Whitties window. Is that so?
Side yard setbacks in the proposed code are the same as they are today.
Which is what?
Don't know in that district, 7 or 8 feet, maybe?
So
Yes.
then that's out of order with the existing code?
No.
Well, it is, because it's closer than 8 feet to the boundary line.
It's not.
Yes, 3 feet.
I can show you the site plan after the meeting.
Okay, I wish you would. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Coming down here, Mr. McDonough, Ms. Allison, front row. All right. All right, well, that will conclude public comment. Let's move on to number 6. We have a number of action items to consider as council. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the minutes of the February 3rd caucus and February 8th business meeting?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Actually, I'd like to ask for us to postpone that motion. I presented to us a few days ago. Yeah, no, our microphone.
You know, let's bring this microphone back, and this is not my favorite room, so I apologize. We are working on our equipment in addition to all the other things we're working on.
Could you just pass it around, perhaps? This really doesn't work.
I know.
I'm just asking if we can postpone that motion and review those minutes we just received them recently, and I would like to read them.
So there's a motion. Is there a second?
Second,
It's a discussion.
I'll second it, but I'm not.
We can move it to table.
Yeah,
That's fine.
move the table, right.
So follow.
I'd also just suggest that we table. I reviewed them.
So who's the second? Bob is the second.
Yes.
White Sport.
Whitesport.
Thank you.
I actually did have a chance to review all of them, and I don't think there were, when I reviewed it, no substantial changes, but at least the business meeting was a transcript, and there were some typos in the transcription error that could use cleanup just for clarity when they're published. And it was a pretty lengthy list of all minor typos. I've sent those all back to Matt. I think other people had a couple small comments. I recommend we not approve them until we have a final draft that when approved could just be published to the website.
Okay. Is there a general consensus that that's what we do? Okay. Someone want to make a motion to table?
I'll make a motion to table.
Second, Marlene. Okay. All in favor of tabling the motion to accept the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. None opposed. The motion is tabled until our next meeting. Or until someone brings it. Can I get a motion to adopt the February schedule of bills?
Mind passing me It's in here.
Which is want this?
And we actually have a written motion now. Covered in something else. There we are. I move the Borough Council adopt the February schedule of bills per the attachment to the Finance and Administration Committee report.
Is there a second?
I second.
Any discussion regarding the schedule of bills?
I have one question.
Yes.
Reviewing January 12th to February 8th, which was the last time the bills were put in front of us, and then February 9th to March 14th, there is a jump in overtime hours for our highway department, a significant jump. And I brought this to Mr. Metrick's attention, and if you could just explain, we went from 44 hours of overtime in the January of 16, so that's January 12th to February 8th, and then looking at February 9th to March 14th, there's a significant increase of 145 hours.
Yes. Can you speak to...
Yes, I can. Even though the blizzard, our weekend blizzard this year happened late in January, the time accumulated and the checks that went out actually went out in February. And that blizzard happened on a weekend, so every hour that our work crew put in was overtime, and the time they worked on Sunday, according to their contract, is double time. So that was the reason for the big jump.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on the schedule of bills? All in favor of passing the schedule of bills for the month of February, say aye.
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 Any opposed? No, it's unanimous. Would someone like to make a resolution regarding approval of an appointment to fill the vacancy of the zoning hearing board alternate?
Well, it's coming out of our committee, so I will move that on resolution 2006-07, approval of an appointment to fill the vacancy of the zoning hearing board alternate.
Okay. Is there a second?
I'll second. Bob, give it a Bob.
Bob had it first.
That's right.
He's 20 milliseconds early. All right, well, let's have a discussion. There were 5 candidates. Katie Skeen, Jen Pryor, Joshua Willis, Deborah Lonsdorf, and William Martin. I'll throw it to the floor. What do you guys think? Or how would you like to...
I think people should nominate, see how many people are nominated, and then we'll, you can vote on those who are nominated. Majority, and we'll have to figure out the second plan.
Okay.
So I'll start now, nominate Katie Skeen.
I'll second that.
My vote is for Katie Skeen.
Mine also, though I would say I would also be supportive of Ms. Pryor, who I think as an attorney would also be very well qualified for that position. And I'd, in any event, like to thank Mr. Martin for the support that he offered in supporting any of these newer members of an alternate position in one of our appointed boards as they take a role in the community.
Okay. Anyone else have anything to add? Well, why don't we take a vote?
Could I move to, well, I actually have text that we can then slot the potentially appointee's
Yes.
name into to amend the,
Okay.
so could I move to amend Resolution 2016-07 to the following text, to appoint, should it be Katie Skeen, or do we have a formal first name?
Says Katie
Katie
Skeen.
Skeen. To appoint Katie Skeen as an alternate to the Narberth Borough Zoning Hearing Board for a term of 3 years, effective immediately.
Okay. It's your own amendment, so if your seconder agrees. All right, so amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Moving on to item D, Resolution 2016-008. Is there a motion for the shade tree? If you could just make that original motion to put it on the table, and then we can do the same.
Yes, I move to put Resolution 2016-008 on the table to appoint 2 members to the Narberth Borough Shade Tree Commission for a term of 5 years, effective immediately. 2 members to be named in.
Okay, is there a second?
Discussion.
Second.
All right, some discussion?
If you would be kind enough, do we have the names? I'm
I
sorry.
do. Robert McGreevy, Peter Grove, Rick Trallis, Martin Harrell, and Lorraine Harper.
I move that we appoint, well, it's not a motion at this point. I just,
You just state your preference.
I prefer that we appoint Rob McGreevy and Rick Trallis.
Okay.
I hate to agree with Bob, but I thought those two really seem to capture what I'm looking for, and I'm sure what Bob's looking for, because we agree on this. But I was very impressed with Mr. Grove. Those of us that know Mr. Grove, Peter Grove, know that he will participate immensely. Charlie made great notes of Ms. Harper, and hopefully, so hopefully she'll be, is she here tonight? But hopefully she'll get involved also. And I don't have any comment on Mr. Harrell. So that's my thoughts.
I agree with the Bobs.
Okay. Can I just note that we have like an embarrassment of riches here? That was actually one of the, I don't know if anybody was here for last week's meeting where we had people speak up about joining the Shade Tree Commission, but I mean, it was almost the setup to a joke about botany. And so I think we're, like with many things in the borough, we've got great and committed volunteers, and we're going to be okay. I agree with the suggestion, Mr. McGreevy and Mr. Trallis, because for the specific reason that their skill sets around design and setting up a program based on the work they've done with other organizations, I think would mesh really nicely to helping us push a little bit of planning on the commission. And I think hearing Mr. Grove and other people know him and his commitment to being involved in any event at a practical level with planting, and Ms. Harper, who said she'd throw her name in the ring but will be involved regardless and can bring some outside experience. I think appointing Rob McGreevy and Rick Trallis to the formal positions, but I think they'll get a lot of support from other volunteers, including the other folks who threw their hat in the ring, and I think we as a community are just going to be incredibly well served regardless, and I hope over the coming years we see a lot more tree cover.
Well said.
Ms. Richmond, anything?
I don't know.
I would like to add that this is a special time for the Shade Tree Commission because the age of the canopy trees in the borough are reaching end of life for many of the species, and it's just a relation to when our town kind of began and where we are now. And I'll take that embarrassment of riches. I hope that the Shade Tree Commission can find a way to empower citizens who may not be appointed members of the commission, but that they can have kind of equal rights and privileges in the doing of preserving the canopy and preparing it for the next generations that are to come. So hopefully that will happen.
I would just ask Mr. Metrick to contact the other members of the Shade Tree Commission, see if we can get them to convene a meeting. It's convenient for you folks, and then once that's convenient for you, please let the rest of council know, and technically the public too. But I would like to see them get started now. Discussions, they have a lot of ideas, and they're going to wait for us to say do something, and we're going to kind of wait for them to say what can you do. So
I think that's a very good point. Okay, well, Would you like to amend your resolution?
I'd like to move to amend Resolution 2016-008 to read, resolution to appoint Rob McGreevy and Rick Trellis to the Narberth Borough Shade Tree Commission for a term of 5 years effective immediately.
Second.
Okay, it's accepted. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Unanimous. Moving on, Resolution 2016-009.
That's your turn.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's me. I'm writing in people's names on the motion. Sorry, which I put right on top of my agenda. Right. Resolution 2016-009 to release escrow funds for the land development project located at 612 to 630 Haverford Avenue in the amount of $131,891.10 per the recommendation of Pannoni Engineering in their letter dated March 4th, 2016.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'd just like to note for the record, the agenda says 603 through 609 Haverford, and that is a typo. It is 612 through 630 Haverford Avenue is the correct address for these escrow funds. Any discussion?
Yeah, just by way of clarification, what the heck is this? When a property developer is building a development project, they put some funds in escrow as kind of a set-aside guarantee that they're actually going to finish their work. And the borough engineer goes in and periodically at checkpoints through the project inspects to see, like, have they hit milestones, and at that point, money gets released out of escrow. And so this project is the two sets of twins by the back of the old tennis courts on Haverford Avenue. And they've hit some milestones. This is releasing funds out of escrow to them according to the recommendation of the engineering firm's review. It's not all of the money that's in escrow. There's still maybe one more inspection that has to happen at the commissioning of that property. And to save time, the next resolution is going to be about a similar escrow release on a different development project. So they're both kind of the same process. Two different properties though.
Okay. Any other discussion from any other council members? All in favor of passing Resolution 2016-009, approval of escrow release for 612 through 630 Haverford Avenue land development, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes. Last one, Councilor Cilio.
Sorry. It's 612 to 630.
Okay.
That's the agenda's not right. All right, I would like to make a motion to, I would like to propose Resolution 2016-010 to release escrow funds for the land development project located at Old St. Margaret's School in the amount of $32,923 per the recommendation of Pannoni Engineering in their letter dated March 1st, 2016.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Westport. Any discussion on this?
Sorry, I meant to note this before. Pannoni does give the borough a letter, which you might have noticed in the text of the resolution, which is public record. So if anybody wants to see, they set forth the schedule of the escrow releases that have happened and the money that's left in escrow, and those could be made available on request from the office.
Fascinating stuff.
It's really lively reading.
All right, all in favor of Resolution 2016-10? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None. Resolution carries. Public Works.
Resolution 2016-011. Members of the Public Works Committee of Borough Council present the following resolution for vote and approval. To approve a time extension of the existing agreement with Pannoni Engineering for work on Phase 2 final design of the North Narberth Avenue Bridge per the recommendations of the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation in their letter dated February 18, 2016, respectfully submitted to the Public Works Committee.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, seconded by Councilor Westport. And is there any discussion? I know the question on everybody's minds. Bob?
Yeah, no, it's pretty straightforward. Pannoni has been hired to do this. There was a time frame on the contract, we've extended that. And the bigger question is, when will the work start on the Narberth Avenue Bridge, or North Narberth Avenue Bridge? And the answer continues to be, we do not know. It could be in 2 months, it could be in 8 months. Do you have a specific,
I don't know for sure, but I do have some more information.
Tell us.
Sure.
We're eager.
The reason for the request for this time extension is that this is a very lengthy project in time and money's expended. This is a project, too, that involves 4 governmental agencies, and when you do one governmental agency, it goes slow. They are in the process right now of finalizing the right-of-way plans, and that's causing a delay in their coordination with SEPTA and Amtrak. So the signature of this contract extension will enable right-of-way plans to be completed in April. There's some more information in this letter as to what exact steps happen next, but I'll cut to the chase and tell you that the project manager is anticipating that the bid documents, those are the documents that go out to the contractors, the world of bridge builders, sometime between the end of this year and spring 2017. And the start of construction will commence about 8 to 12 weeks post-issuance of bid documents. That's the typical time frame of issuing your bid documents, vetting your bidders, and then getting shovels in the ground.
what was the date again?
Sometime between the end of this year and spring of 2017, the construction documents will be completed, the bid will be let, and you can anticipate construction beginning 8 to 12 weeks after that, 2 to 3 months after that point that we get the bid out.
So we have plenty of time to put a roundabout in.
Sure.
Just wanted to make sure.
I'm ready when you are, Bob.
Is that, and I'm new to the Public Works Committee, so I got to observe prior dialogue at a bit of an arm's length. Is that timeline dependent in any way on the passage of state budget to ensure availability of funds?
Most of these funds are federal funds.
Federal funds just pushed through the stage?
The only thing that could possibly happen is there could be reprioritizing if other funds are cut and federal transportation funds are needed for something else. So, that's what we wait and see, and everybody tiptoe over the bridge for the next year.
That's right. The bridge, just for the information of the public, the bridge receives a thorough inspection every 6 months. Someone comes in the middle of the night, under the tracks, on a special car, and they go up there and they bang on things real hard with hammers. The borough the council made a tough choice to invest over $300,000 in repairing that structure with a little spidey sense that the imminent replacement may not be so imminent, and that was a couple years ago. So we will keep our close eyes on it. It is part of our job in government to keep public thoroughfares open for business. So it's on the table. Is there any further discussion? All right, all in favor of approving Resolution 2016-11?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Public Safety, Ordinance 991.
Here's 991. I move that Borough Council adopt the attached ordinance of 991, amending Chapter 57, Disorderly Conduct, Nuisances of the Narberth Borough Code to provide for prohibitions of conduct and activities during certain times and to provide for civil enforcement of violations.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, it's on the table. This ordinance has come onto the table a couple of times.
That's nice.
Is there any new discussion, anything anyone would like to?
Would like to have the full ordinance either printed or in our...
I think that we have it here.
We have it here. You sure do.
Pass it over.
Absolutely.
I think we
Yeah.
I think
are.
we're good with it, but
Yeah.
This is the popularly described noise ordinance.
Right.
Currently in the borough, you can disturb the peace at any time. We've heard from the public that maybe more well-defined regulations in regards to quiet hours in the borough and activities and when they could occur, especially in terms of construction projects, might be appreciated. And Councilor Tevlin Moffett has put something together. It went through a few rounds of revisions amongst council members, a few corrections based on the model document that our solicitor, Mr. Welko, provided, and here it is.
It's great.
All right.
Thank you.
No further discussion? All in favor of adopting ordinance 991, ordinance amending Chapter 57 disorderly conduct nuisances of the Narberth Borough Code to provide for prohibitions of conduct and activities during certain times and to provide for civil enforcement of violations, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimous. Let's see, flip the page. Public safety again.
Yep. I move that Borough Council, Borough Council adopt attached ordinance 994, which amends ordinance 673, approved in April of 1977, as amended, which established privileged parking by creating a 2-hour parking time zone on the 200 block of Marion Avenue.
I second that.
All right, it's on the table. Any discussion?
I just want to thank Ms. Barinholtz, I don't know if she's here tonight, but for bringing this to council's attention, speaking to every single adult on her block that agreed with her, and I'm glad the council can respond to the request. So I think we did. Hopefully we're doing the right thing.
Okay. All in favor of passing ordinance 994, an ordinance to amend ordinance number 963, approved April 1st, 1977, as amended, which established privileged parking by creating a 2-hour parking time zone on the 200 block of Marion Avenue? Say aye.
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 Any opposed? None? It is unanimous. All right. If council has other business that it would like to discuss at this meeting, now would be the time. And we have a procedure which is to first move to add something to the agenda, and then to, once it's added, we can put a motion on the table to discuss it. I have two items that have been relayed to me. One is accepting the resignation of Councilor Diaz, and the other is a discussion of the form-based zoning code draft. Maybe if we do the first one first, we can get that out of the way.
Okay.
Sorry, are you still under action items? Or?
Yes.
Yes. I'll move.
No, it's not on here. I'm saying that they're not on here.
I'll move to add to the agenda Mr. Diaz's resignation
To accept
letter, to
Mr.
accept Mr. Diaz's resignation letter to this council.
Would someone like to second a motion to add that to the agenda this evening?
Seconded.
That's pretty fast, but here we go.
Meeting clippers.
It's just silly. This is like Jeopardy. Okay, now if you could make the, if you would like to make the motion, so
We're still under.
Oh, now okay. So I'd like
it's
to
a
make...
little bit repetitive for the process.
Make the motion to accept Mr. Richard Diaz's letter of resignation to Borough Council.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilor Wegberg. Okay, public discussion.
I would like to say that working with Mr. Diaz has been an honor and a pleasure. Mr. Diaz still is, a thoughtful and conscientious member of our community. He regrets, I know he regrets, not being able to continue his term. It was my pleasure and my honor to work with him.
Anyone else?
All set.
I think everyone seems to concur.
Well said. We'll miss him.
We will all miss him very much. I know this was a decision that was very difficult for him, but three little keepers,
Yeah.
crazy sleep schedules, you know. All right. All in favor of accepting the resignation of Councilor Diaz? Say aye. Aye. Any opposed? None. This leaves an open seat on Borough Council. The procedure will be from this point, we could accept applications if any of you members of the public here would like to apply, or any registered voters of the borough would like to apply for this position. It is council's obligation to fill this seat within 30 days from today. I know some of us have discussed the potential for setting up some dates for interviews, and since we're all here in the room, I don't think it's premature to block out the evenings of March 29th, 30th, and 31st. And we'll see how many applicants we get, how much time we feel each applicant might need for council to deliberate and discuss the merits of each candidate. And I would hope that our next council meeting, our caucus meeting in April, is on April 6th, that although we do not usually do business at that caucus meeting, I think it's important to fill this seat as quickly as possible. And that would be a goal that I would have, although, you know, it would take a motion from one of you to make it happen. How does that sound?
To make April 6th
To
happen.
make April 6th a date for us to vote. Otherwise, you know, we would have the 11th. If we didn't make a decision by April 11th, we would have to schedule a special meeting in the next 3 days after that. And if we didn't, then I believe it goes to the Court of Common Pleas.
No, it would go to the vacancy board.
Oh, we'll go to the vacancy board. I continue to forget the role and the subordinate happens in our process, and I apologize. I just am focused on the court far away making the decision. Okay, so that's where we are. So if you're interested, apply. If you have questions, each council member has a different perspective that they can offer in terms of the hours, the interests, the tasks, the tools, all of that.
When do they need their applications in by?
Well, what do you think?
I think the end of the day, Friday the 25th, is that?
I think that would
Or
work.
we can send notes out for interview times.
All right. Well, we will
2
advertise.
people or 10 people?
Applications due end of business 5 p.m. on Friday, March 25th. Sent to the Borough Hall. Attention.
We'll work all that out.
We'll work on it.
Don't send it to my inbox.
Okay. All right, thank you. Would anyone like to amend the agenda to discuss anything else this evening?
The agenda to discuss form-based zoning.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of amending the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, accepted. Would someone like to make a motion to put the current draft of the form-based zoning code on the table? Go ahead, Bob.
We'll put it on the table to discuss in the table.
And I'm going to call this 4.1 for the official record. Is that acceptable? We had a 4.0, which was published a few weeks ago. Just, we'll call it for, who seconded it?
Wait, so when we say put on the table, does that mean we're...
For discussion.
For discussion.
Just for discussion.
Just for discussion right now.
Somebody second my...
Someone
I'll second.
Second, okay, it's on the table. We had a 4.0 that was published early in the month. We had 3 busy meetings last week that we heard from the public. We heard from council members who had a pretty healthy debate last Wednesday night. And I want to give some kudos to our borough manager who spent a considerable amount of time over the weekend and today pretty much focused on trying to get us a draft document that incorporated as many of those changes that council saw fit to include so that we could have a discussion today regarding them and see maybe if we can have a productive conversation, see where this is going to take us.
I'd like to begin.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'd just like to begin, council members, with I had a glance to review page 12.
Sorry.
When I speak loudly, I always sound angry. So I just like to pass this around the table. It's a suggestion for some minor changes to the chart of conditional uses on page 12.
Minor changes to the chart of conditional uses on
And basically, just to summarize what it does, council members, it limits the uses that would be allowed within the civic institutional buildings to professional office, multifamily dwelling, professional office, bed and breakfast, child care, group child care, museum or gallery, community service, and religious. And eliminates medical office, funeral home, store, personal service, temporary market, studio, and a small restaurant. I actually don't think it eliminates studio. It keeps studio.
Right.
This is your suggestion to the
This is
document
my
which we all
suggestion, yeah.
received late this afternoon from Mr. Metrick.
It
I'd like
maintains, studio.
give
It
the
maintains temporary market.
public a little background on what the changes are in that document, and I apologize for going
And
through
this,
it.
and the intent of this is to align so that the council recommendation is aligned with what I believe was the original intent of the Planning Commission, which was expressed in the Ordinance 984 draft that allowed for multiple family dwelling and professional office use, as well as the additional institutional uses that are already, that the properties already, the churches are already zoned for. I think the only, and I think those are all reasonable. The uses that remain for civic institutional use are reasonable. I agree with the basic Planning Commission intent and recommendation.
So just to give a brief summary
Sorry, I'm downloading.
to the public who's, I can see, completely lost by what's going on here. A couple of, I would say, significant changes to the draft that you last saw published is what we are now discussing. Number one is the elimination of the yellow zone on South Narberth Avenue. That would change that yellow area to orange, amber. I'm getting nods if I say something.
And essentially what that does is removes the possibility of the apartment style building on South Narberth.
On South Narberth Avenue, that's correct. The other is limitation for civic institutional buildings from what was in the document, which was published in March, that said 100% commercial use was permitted, to bring that down to 50% commercial use. And what Mr. Weisbrod was just discussing was further limiting the number of uses that were permitted in that 50%. Is that correct, Councilor Weisbrod?
That's correct. But basically, reducing the number of uses that are allowed by conditional use in civic institutional buildings.
There were a number of changes that came from our solicitor. I think every time you read this document, any document of 104 pages, you find little things here and there, and we were able to make some. Do you want to speak to any of them in particular?
Then besides this particular issue, there's been a number of the recommendations and questions that I made. I mean, just pertinent to today's meeting, I think we took out the noise issues because that's in the ordinance that we just passed. One of the things that was done this last month, which was in my solicitor's report, is that we were successful earlier last month in defending the zoning officer's interpretation because there was a gray area between what's a driveway and what's a parking space. That's a correction that was made. Certain definitions were cleaned up, certain language was clarified. So a number of the recommendations and questions that I had made, and I know there was a laundry list of them, have been addressed in this new code.
Thank you. The other change that I think is significant, just a moment, let me pen it up. Does anyone else have anything to say?
There are some additions, and maybe John, you can elaborate on these to 124.301C. It just keeps going. There are 4 new little paragraphs under the giving the Borough Council greater authority to monitor and enforce any guarantees of permanent protection that are made through a conditional use application for an eligible civic institutional building. So already in the last draft of the code that came out last month, we took some of the additional conditionality that could be recommended by the Planning Commission and imposed by council above and beyond what's in our current conditional use ordinance. We got that into the draft. Even though that law didn't pass, we got the teeth, most of them, into the draft of the form-based code, and we've added 4 more paragraphs that I think might have just gotten missed before. But the additional safeguard standards that can be imposed on a conditional use plan for any subsequent modifications or amendments to the planning document shall require Borough Planning Commission review and Borough Council written approval. All express conditions that are established by Borough Council for conditional use approval shall be followed. So it gives us additional enforcement. These are ones that were in the in 984 as well. Borough Council shall have the right to enforce the document that establishes the guarantees and be permitted access to the premises at reasonable times for the purposes of inspecting the material and elements of the facades for determining compliance with the document. I don't know if you need to type the whole thing, it's just in here. that. The document that establishes the guarantee, so this is if a conditional use plan is approved, after an application is made and it goes through planning commission and it goes through council and it's approved, the person who applied for conditional use has to put a guarantee on the building that they'll protect in perpetuity any of the major structures on the property. And so this is just clarifying that document with the guarantees has to be binding on the applicant, its successors, assigns, transferees, and all persons thereafter claiming by, under, or through the applicant, and the document shall run with the land. So what it means is, if someone comes up with a conditional use for a property, and they apply for that conditional use, and that gets through the planning commission, and they recommend that to council, and council goes and tax whatever conditions they see fit on it, subject to all the other paragraphs that got put in. When that gets signed off on, one of the conditions that plan getting signed off on is that that property is then bound in perpetuity to protect the building that's there, subject to the conditions that the council sets. So we got a lot more teeth into that conditional use. And I think the whole Ordinance 984 drafting was actually a learning process that helped inform some of these changes. I think are going to be pretty positive. And by the way, that conditional use, that's not just for the civic and institutional buildings, is it?
It would be for I mean, that particular provision would apply to those, but no, any conditional use, for example, under 4A district, you can still have this chart is all the conditional uses. For example, a community service institution could be approved by conditional use. So there may be an issue, and the definition is somewhat broad as to what is a community service. And then it would be up to council to determine through the conditional use process whether something actually is a community service or not that would make that use applicable to the 4A area.
Yeah, so somebody comes with a potential conditional use, not just for the big properties, but you'll note that in this code, there are conditional uses for, a lot of other smaller properties in the borough. And that lets the discussion be for each potential conditional use, okay, what's your plan for this property? And open it up to public comment and input at both the planning commission and the council, so that when there's a plan to be discussed for a particular property, it can get that full public input to ensure that it's an appropriate reuse of an existing property. So I think that's actually a pretty big deal to have that in there.
That's a big deal.
Thank you. So also to add, in addition to bringing down the amount of commercial use that a civic institutional building can have from 100% down to 50%, there is also language, a definition of a professional office. And I'll read it. It states that a professional office, which would be the conditional use that would allow for that 50% or one of them, an office use that is limited to business office uses, including uses that involve administrative, clerical, real estate, financial, governmental, certain professional operations, or operations of a similar character that are not reasonably expected to result in regular, frequent client-customer visits to the office space, with a limit of 1 employee per 150 square feet. And with that, does anyone know the square footage of the Elmwood? I hate to focus on specific property.
Works out to about 33 employees per 5,000 square feet of office.
Okay. And do you know the size of the Elmwood Avenue building in terms of its internal square footage?
Depends what you call basketball court. We don't have a definition of basketball.
Hold up there. Didn't we figure out, I used to build out the parking rules that it could be like less than 4,000 square feet of office space in the broader building?
Question on being.
And it's like 11,000 total.
Total.
I don't want to say bad numbers because there's a guy sitting over here probably typing me saying I don't want to say bad numbers.
In terms of the build-out that you did for us over the weekend, what was the maximum number? What did a commercial use of that Elmwood Avenue property look like in that scenario with these restrictions?
A proposal of up to 5,400 square feet of office space is about the limit that you can fit in there and provide 11 parking spaces on site. Council would have to agree to spaces being placed in the front yard setback area as well. But that's sort of the maximum you could do. You could do anything less than that.
Yeah, and I think if you figured that the underlying zoning code says you can't put This is all entirely hypothetical, by the way, because there's no plan if there were. But like if you limit the parking, because there are minimum parking requirements placed on office use, I think it would take it down to like 8 spaces and under 4,000 square feet of office in an about 11,000 square foot building, which take 4,000 to round up and divide by Bob's number, I think you get to.
So Bob, did you have a sense of?
26.
Yeah.
It seems to me it brings it down, to somewhere between 26 and 35.
And the goal was to address kind of a worst-case scenario that was on the public's mind, right? That there would be a way, and I actually think that in looking at it and how it applies to the other professional offices, is that it would come under the same provision, offer some nice constraints around the borough as well.
Right.
You know, so in light of what I just said about there being a lot more controls around the plan, I'll say again what I kind of said before, and I also tried to write this up to get my thoughts together. Really, in an ideal world, if you're trying to preserve buildings, whether the civic and institutional buildings or houses that can be conditionally used, your odds of success of getting someone to come up with a plan to reuse the building instead of tearing it down and rebuilding are if you can maximize the chances that there's some reuse plan that's worth more than a tear down. And so just in the abstract, if you can open up the possible plans that someone could bring for a property as wide as you can to sort of maximize the chances if someone comes up with an economically viable idea you might not have thought of, and then have that funnel be real tight after some, bring us a plan for reuse that'll work, but then give as many points of control for the reviewing bodies as you can so that the public can come in and say, we don't think that's consistent with the historical character of the property or the look and feel of the outside of the property or, other conditions. There's pretty wide latitude for conditions to be imposed. Then, as long as there are enough of those hooks for the Planning Commission and the Council to validly impose conditions based on public input on those plans, you got a nice big funnel on the front end, so you're maximizing the chances that there's a plan you might not have thought of that will result in reuse if it's approved, and then you have as many chances as you can to take public input, tailor that plan, or even reject it to keep anything but like a good plan from getting through. With that said, so I think we've talked a lot about there's been a lot of public feedback about limiting the mixed reuse of some of these properties, and that's good for some of them. For others of them that are on our civic and institutional list, like the St. Margaret's School, I mean, this is just to take a case in point, it's a different kind of building. It's one that I think it's on the list, if I remember right.
Yes, it is.
It's got a lot of parking. It's kind of an institutional building that looks a lot like an office building already. My concern is because we're kind of tightening the screws on the front end of that funnel, using my hands a lot, which doesn't transcribe well, that we might be losing out on potential opportunities for some of these other properties like that. And maybe that's something we want to address down the road with yet more public input and more thought, and have a lot of time to think about how open that funnel should be. My thought is there are a couple points as I look at the other properties that are on the list that say, should we be open to all office use if we know that public feedback on a particular plan is going to be heavily focused around that? Maybe it might open up possibilities for some of the other properties on the list. Single family, and it's not the right term.
Yeah, right.
But the multi-unit building is a conditional use for these properties. But 1 and 2 households isn't. It's it seems reasonable, but who's to say that someone wouldn't want to turn 30 years from now when if let's say one of the remaining church properties comes up into a downtown mansion, they're willing to pay a crazy amount of money for it, it's going to look really nice. Do we want to have single and 2-family houses on the list? I don't know if we need to do that now, if we can open these uses up later, but just philosophically, I think it's good to have as wide a funnel as you can on the front end and as much control as we can on the back end. We've done a really good job of tightening up the control on the back end. I think possibly based on our experience with the recent ordinance amendment, we're keeping the screws pretty tight on the front end. I think that's good for being super conservative, as we are in a lot of other ways with the planning. But I worry that in the long run, it might cause us to lose some properties we otherwise might not. And I'm not just talking about the big ones. There's a lot of conditional use on houses and apartment buildings and twins kind of baked into the other zoning districts. And I just worry that if we're too closed on the front end of that funnel, you won't see it, but over time you'll start to lose the potential for some reuse that you might otherwise at least have a chance to look at plans for.
While you're on that note, could you suggest what you would add in? Because it's my understanding in the zoning is that if you say multifamily, that also automatically allows two-family, single-family.
Oh, does it? Oh,
yeah.
so
So,
don't worry
in
about
other
it.
words, a three-family home doesn't automatically have to be for three families. It could be for one family.
Don't look
So
that up
it's
too much,
preclude-
because I'm going to lose
It
it.
isn't required to be for three families. So,
Enormous.
so that would include your idea of a church becoming a single-family home at some point in the future. Already in the conditional use, at least in the 4A conditional uses, are professional office, medical office, funeral home, store, personal service, temporary market, studio, small restaurant, bed and breakfast, child care, group care, family care, museum, gallery, community service, religious, or community service, not religious, only civic institution. So what else would you add?
I mean, I would add restaurant, for example. We have a small restaurant. I don't know what the distinction there is.
Small restaurant.
And we have the weird situation where entertainment venue, which again, it's kind of nice to have slightly oddly, openly defined things on the front end, is an allowed conditional use in 3B and 3C, but not in 4A. Why not?
Well, I'll tell you my sense, which is, with a 104-page document, we can fiddle for a long time. I guess I want to get a sense from the council members if we have addressed the showstoppers that many of you had on Wednesday night, and how you feel about moving this document forward to a hearing. Anyone want to address that?
There's a couple more questions on this, but to answer your question, the guts of what we what has been done to this document addresses the some controls. I mean, the neighbors that live near the Elmwood Church, some want to save the building, some are very, very concerned about the additional cars, and I think this tempers that. I mean, it doesn't resolve it. It's still not going to be residential, but we have residential, so that's somewhat positive, but there's that first bit of office use, and it's, it doesn't fit what a lot of the neighbors want. At the same time, I think this council, is very concerned about old buildings and historic civic institution buildings like this, and, this is a way that accomplishes both. Yeah, unlimited use, that would be fun, that would be most practical to get anybody in there, but you didn't finish the sentence, at what cost? And of course, we would control that cost, but at this stage, I don't think the community's ready to say, okay, go ahead, control that cost, because it doesn't. So I think this is a good compromise. And I think knowing what we have on the table right now, this fits everything described by the potential developer and other thoughts. And if that doesn't come through, then we'll figure it out. It's respond to something in the near term, and also recognize that those other 4 buildings are out there and they're under a little bit of a limitation and control. That should be, this does that. And same with South Narberth Avenue. I understand the Planning Commission's reasons why they thought it was appropriate, but the reality was it was a nominal chance of that actually happening, and there was a significant concern that it didn't add and it would cause other issues with different types of buildings coming down. So I appreciate that we were able to respect the planning commission, but come off their thoughts. And so I think for me, it's got us there. Obviously, we need to work with our solicitor to know what can be done. And the other thing is, if we move forward on this today, we still have a month before we vote.
That's right.
And if we find something within a month, or if there's something we're not realizing, then yeah, we have to go back to the drawing board. That wouldn't be my intent, but it's not a done deal as of today, but it lets us make it a done deal next month. So that gives the public 30 days to vet this out and respond and send notes. And if there's something big we missed, then that'll come through, and unfortunately it'll be a delay to re-advertise. So I'm good.
And Bob, just to clarify, so I'm looking in the draft that was sent around today on the map. In the revision, we've got orange, so that's not 3B but 3, not 3C but 3B for both sides of South Narberth Avenue. Except what was the
Except for green, where the
and it just extends right across to the existing apartment building on the other side of South Narberth?
No, it does not.
No, it does not.
Stops at South Narberth.
So it stops at South Narberth. So you have two non-conforming apartment buildings.
Exactly. Which are noted in the planning code that they're grandfathered in.
They're grandfathered in, and so you're just taking what's probably a really small risk, that if those are ever raised and redeveloped, you redevelop them consistent with
the size they currently
the size, well, with the you couldn't put you couldn't replace it with another multifamily, could you? Or is the use grandfathered even though you'd have to abide by the new footprint?
We'll let the solicitor answer that.
Those two properties, that the multifamily use on the north and south end of South Narberth Avenue, would that be grandfathered for any redevelopment of that project as multifamily? Of that parcel as multifamily?
If it's multifamily now, and I can go to the code, but generally would stay multifamily. I think there are provisions in there for if it's not abandoned for a year, then it can stay with that same use. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah. So then all you have on that block are two non-conformances. Oh, I'm sorry. So
let me look why.
We're going to do a double check. We're going to do a repeat. Just a moment.
A non-conforming building that's destroyed by accidental cause may be rebuilt and used for the same non-conforming use, provided certain conditions are met. But that says by accidental cause.
By accidental cause. So if someone wanted to redevelop those two apartment buildings as multifamily, they couldn't, like voluntarily.
That's correct.
Put an apartment building back up.
That's right.
Sounds weird, but okay.
Let's say it's one more, one more saved building.
It's a lot fewer non-conformances than we have under the current code by a long shot. So
generally, this is done. We see it a lot with non-conforming garages, where you can't tear down the entire garage and build it up again. So what they do is they build it from the inside out to keep it as a remodel.
Okay.
To get around that. So it would be a massive scale of that, I imagine, if they wanted to keep that use. And ultimately, you'd have a new, hopefully well-constructed building at that time. But obviously, would still have to go through all the permitting requirements for any reconstruction or remodels.
That's not killer, though. I know that was a showstopper for you, Bob. And changing it only results in two non-conforming properties.
Yeah, that's why I thought it seemed silly to not do that.
Bob, would you consider making an amendment to the ordinance that's on the motion that's on the table to move for a hearing on this code?
In a couple minutes, I had a couple other small items, and others may have other.
Take your time. We are well ahead of schedule.
I did want to just get clarity. Sean, you sent around, and thank you for doing so much this weekend. You sent around a note on what the potential parking allotments would be on the four adapted. Can you kind of recant the highlights of that? Obviously, especially Elmwood, but
you can fit 0 parking spaces on the Lutheran church. You can fit 103 on the St. Margaret's School. Therefore, you could reuse that building for really anything in the code. You could even reuse it 100%. If you were going to allow 100% non-residential reuse, you could use it 100% as an office building, and it would still have more parking than it needs. You could build a 20-space parking lot next to the Catholic Church Rectory, which would support a small mixed residential office use in the sanctuary and rectory buildings. The Presbyterian Church has a exactly same size lot of about 20 spaces, so the same build-out potential there in the Presbyterian Church would exist at the one I just mentioned. The Presbyterian Church is presently very intensely used. It has multi-use office. It's a large church, and it has a daycare in it. I found that interesting. And on the Elmwood Avenue Church, you could fit 8 parking spaces outside the front yard setback area, or 11 if you were to allow by conditional use an applicant to put spaces in the front yard.
And assuming this went through, how many permits, parking permits, would the office part? I guess the residential would be the same as anybody else. They can get 5, 8, 10, depending on how many residents and cars they have. How many would the office be entitled to under the current?
Well, there is a provision if the owner applicant proposes a non-residential use that council has discretion to mete out the number of employee parking permits, and not only the amount but the geography of the distribution. It also caps the number of on-street permits to 1 per residential unit as a possible condition council could impose.
Great, so that covers a lot of the, I think the people who are going to be potentially slammed by this are the people who are right on Elmwood, where it's really tightly parked. And if they have to share their district even further, or dilute it, we'll say, but this pretty much covers that, so it's a positive.
And to further note, I think if somebody came with a plan for, just to pick an example, one of those churches where you could put 20 spaces on site, if they're not currently on that site, like St. Margaret's Church, for example, do we have, with this new conditionality language, some ability to control that? Like if you're paving over what was historically grass open area next to the historical building, that is part of the...
There are impervious cover limits.
There are impervious cover limits, but there are also some softer language around the conditions that the Planning Commission and Council can impose around this. Look and feel isn't the exact language, but the historical character of property.
Well, the historical character of the property is more to the building exterior itself. As far as the parking area goes, that would be tied in more to the general health, safety, welfare, how well it fits into the surrounding community.
That's what I was getting at.
So as far as for example, the parking in the front yard setback, that would be something that at a conditional use hearing, if that was to pass, they would have to present council with a plan. Council would look at that plan and say, I don't like the way that looks. That's too close to the road. If that's the case, they would have to go back and change it. Now, if you were okay with it, you would be able to grant that front parking. And normally you would be able to base your denial, if they tried to push that issue, with the fact that it doesn't fit in with the surrounding community, if it doesn't in fact look right and fit right.
And then I had 2 other, well, we were done with that topic. 2 other points that I saw in the changes that, one is really minor, but I spoke to Sean real briefly about it, is limiting the fence height where a rear yard abuts a street. And I noted that almost all the rear yards on Rockland, that abut Rockland, since it's all Marion frontage, have fences that are 6 or 8 feet high currently, because it's not abutting a sidewalk. And so I thought we could change that to abut a sidewalk as opposed to a street, though I think just because if you look at that, it's just that otherwise you get no protection from the street. It's very minor with cars and your rear yard. Though I will say, I think along Conway.
Yeah, like the back in Narberth Park.
Yeah, I think that has a sidewalk.
It doesn't.
It has higher fences. So I haven't given that as much thought, but I'm concerned about that you don't have that backyard privacy and I think that's something that we could either, I don't know, I just didn't like the lack of backyard privacy. It's shown by the consistency across all of, or most of Rockland, that people have that, and they obviously want it.
Can I ask a procedural question, actually? So if we were to put the code up for consideration,
So I wanted to actually make a point of order, which is, the solicitor has informed me that if we were to move this form-based code forward, at the same time, we would also need a second ordinance updating that FEMA floodplain, and it would offer us an opportunity to have a little bit of time to have some of these smaller items where there's really no disagreement, but rather than taking a complex document and making it more complex here at the table, hash out some of those things and append it on. They would be both enacted at the same, they should be enacted at the same time.
The FEMA, as a background, FEMA is requiring all the municipalities to pass a revised floodplain map ordinance that's in line with their revised flood maps. Every municipality must do it, and it should be in the zoning code. It isn't something that we want to put into our current zoning code and then have a new code. So I believe it would be best procedurally to add that on to the form zoning code at some point. At the time we do that, we can also make additional amendments to the code.
Because I could see, I agree with you about the fencing, and I could see where we wouldn't have the expense for the borough to advertise for a hearing to make that change, per se, all by itself. But if we already know, kind of right on the heels, we're going to do that, then...
Yeah, just,
it's a thought. It's a thought.
Well, I understand, but I mean, if we're going to think about moving forward to advertise tonight, we have to advertise the other elements tonight too, or do we have a couple of weeks, or?
What elements?
Well, things like the fence and then...
If council wants to add things to this ordinance, we could amend it tonight, make sure it's clear on the record as to what we're amending. Everything would have to go back to the planning commission, and that's going to have to happen regardless of what happens tonight.
As it does with any zoning ordinance.
And they can say, we don't like that fence issue. We don't have to listen to the planning commission, but it has to go to them for the recommendations prior to us, council, acting them. So any additions, for example, Mr. Whiteboard's additions, as long as it's clear as to what those changes would be, we would make that on the record tonight. It would have to be marked up, and then that would be the revised ordinance that would go back.
Let's see how many other things other people have. I just had two things. I have that, and we'll hold that for a second.
Go ahead.
And then the other thing, I saw that the term family unit went from 5, Sean, can you recite what it went from what?
No more than 5 persons unrelated by marriage, birth, or adoption, and back down to 2 where it is today.
And I guess that the concept, and probably, I'm not quite sure what that intent was. I guess on one hand, you don't want the group house mindset next door to you. I'm not allowed to say the college house. And,
don't say that. I'll write it down.
And so I understand that from the community concerns. I just, when you start talking the words family unit, I know it's a zoning term. I'm not sure how that impacts things or not. One thing I recognize in the there's also a note about temporary housing, which is kind of starting to touch the Airbnb mindset. And so if you reduce your family unit there, you don't have me, Charlie, and our frat mates all coming together at an Airbnb next to you for a weekend. Neither of us were in frats, so don't worry about it. So that, I'm just a little bit confused about what it has that value, but I don't know if it has any negative values. So.
Any other councilors have an opinion?
Why was it changed?
Yeah, that's what I'm trying.
I listened to feedback about how it would allow large groups of people who weren't related to each other to live under one roof, and that was objectionable too. And I got that feedback through maybe the second or third reissuance of the ordinance.
I saw a fair amount of that feedback also.
Do you agree with it?
I mean,
So I don't agree with it. Sorry, Charlie.
No.
And I understand, and I agree with your point. We certainly don't want you boys and a fraternity house next to me. Point well taken. But I think of some folks that volunteer in the other part of my life that I do, and some of those folks want to be together and pool their resources and live in one property in the borough, and that certainly is about 4 of them being unrelated in the age bracket of 65 and above. And that they have been friends for 60 plus years and are prepared to take care of one another. So I think that's the touch point for me. So I object to it. I would like it to go back. But not a deal breaker. We can fix it later if we have to.
Yeah, well, I guess the error on the conservative side would be to go to the 2 and look at it, but I don't have a clear
Right.
opinion on this because of
Right.
both sides of the coin.
Right.
I just wanted to point that out because I didn't hear it. I thought that was significant.
It is a pretty big change. I mean, you do have more complicated family situations and living situations that limited definition might not cover.
Right.
It's pretty narrow. At the same time, it is what is in the current code.
Yeah.
And it may be,
Don't like it there either.
don't like it there either.
So the current code is 2.
The other thing,
Two.
yeah, and it's kind of old language. I just noted when I read it that it said 2.
Yeah.
You can't have 2 or more people who are, I think, unrelated by marriage, living and cooking together.
Yes.
Sharing a kitchen
Sharing a
table.
kitchen.
No,
right.
it wasn't sharing a kitchen, it was cooking. And I thought,
It says sharing a kitchen.
I mean, what if they just get takeout?
From a small restaurant.
Can they not live together then? No one, if you don't have to. So, it's one of those things that merits an overlook.
But yeah.
I would be more comfortable with us looking at the other way, leaving it the way it was originally recommended with 4. Can you just repeat what I said? I'm not saying
Bob is suggesting to leave it the way it was originally recommended at 4 unrelated individuals living under the same roof.
and then looking to see if there's, in conversations with the planning commission, looking to see if there's really cause to reduce it to 2. For this very reason,
Well,
there are unrelated, responsible adults who want to live in group settings and group houses, unless that's like an issue of protected class, that there's some kind of protection for people who are 65 and older that allows them to live together, even despite our zoning code.
Well, and it's not just age,
Yeah, okay.
but it's all sorts of disabilities. Group home litigation is one of the most common
Right.
litigated matters in all municipalities. And you have to make provisions in order to comply with fair housing for what's considered a group home. We've done it with children, but we don't have it with adults. The way that it's addressed is either creating a separate group home provision that addresses age-based or care-based families and allowing reasonable accommodations for nurses, aides, and such. Or you just have a larger family unit number and then also allow for reasonable accommodations if that was to happen. So one or the other, I think we would be fine by not having separate provisions for adult group homes and reducing the number to family where it would be unable to have that sort of a home. I think if we were challenged, we would be in trouble. We would have to come up with something to address their federal rights under the Fair Housing and Americans with Disabilities Act.
I'm going to say also, I wanted to go back up to 5 or whatever. Can everyone hear me? The idea is you can have 2 unmarried adults who have stepchildren and a fiance or whatever. You could end up very quickly getting to, you could quickly get to 4 or 5 in what is essentially an alternative family or a non-traditional family from some certain point of view. And it seems the least invasive, privacy-wise, to just raise the number, rather than ask them to fashion themselves as a group home, which is ridiculous. So why we would not want to just let people, yeah. mind our own business.
Is there a consensus at the table to put the number back to where it was? I mean, I'm asking that specifically. It may be somewhere in between in this discussion, but just to move us forward, you'd like to put it back at 5, Charlie?
4 or 5 is fine.
4 or 5?
I would. I just want to confirm that you're still governed by fire code
Always.
and other building
construction
and
code.
structures, so you can't go stuff 5 people into a
Walk-in closet.
mother-in-law apartment or a walk-in closet unless the fire code lets you do it.
That's right.
4 or 5. I'm good with 4 or 5.
I'm good with 4.
Bob?
4 sounds like a
Let's
good
have
number.
4.
Well, so it sounds like we agreed 4.
Do others have other things that they saw in the code?
The one thing I want to point out in the draft, and particularly in the multi, I've seen a lot of comments, letters and otherwise, about multi-family units, multi-family houses, I guess is a particular type of housing in the code. It's, you got your single-family, single dwelling unit, you got your twins, you got your apartment buildings, and slotted in between is the multi-family home, which is got a bunch of, there's a whole page on it, it's got pitched roofs, but it's got totally separated by interior walls, households in it with separate exterior doors. There are a bunch of those that exist in the borough, including one on the corridor of South Narberth Avenue that people have seen and discussed. And I just want to point out that there are, there's a table in the document that's worth everybody reading, and all of us at the table have read it a lot, that talks about required lot space and lot coverage and impervious surfaces. And as you look at the zoning map, and you look at what's allowed in a particular area, you can't stop with the color on the map. You also got to look at the restrictions around lot size, and not just setback, but how many square feet of lot you need in order to put a particular kind of building on it. Multifamily is one that's worth calling out in particular because I've seen a lot of misunderstanding about it, and that one, I'm doing this from memory, so somebody slap me if I get it wrong, but
Multi-family house?
yeah, it's 3,000 square feet per,
Say it again.
I believe you have to have 3,000 square feet of lot space per unit, per household, right? So if you have, if you wanted to take a lot and convert it to a 3-unit multifamily house, that lot would need to be at least 9,000 square feet, right? Which is a pretty big lot. I mean, in my neighborhoods aren't that many that are that big. If you wanted to do a 4-unit lot, you'd have to be 12,000 square feet. And if you wanted to be a 5-unit house, you'd have to be 15,000 square feet. And then in addition, the other thing to look at is the fact that as the lot gets bigger, your ability to put a bigger footprint building on it gets real inefficient real quickly. Because you can put on the first 4,000 square foot of a lot, you can cover with a building 55% of that first 4,000 square feet. But up through the 3C district, any lot square footage above that, you can only cover 5% with more building. And in the 4s, in the 4A district, for example, you can only cover 8% of any lot space above 4,000 square feet with building. So as you read the code, and I include everybody here, I've been pulling out my little calculator, and you're saying, well, what if you had, in this area, can I put a 3, 4, 5-unit multifamily house on my lot? Almost, the great majority of lots in some of these neighborhoods, the answer is going to be no, because you're just limited by the size of the lot. And then if you run the math on, well, what if somebody were to come in and combine lots to get more lot space? And just if you think about the math, you got let's say you want to get to a 5-unit building, you got to get to 15,000 square feet. For a single family home, you got to be on a 6,000 square foot lot. So let's say you're going to take 3 6,000 square foot lots and combine them into an 18,000 square foot lot to put a multifamily house on it. You go from having, I want to say it's like 2,300 square foot of building footprint that you can put on a single family lot, plus another 2,300, plus another 2,300, and you can stack that up to a multi-story, single-family home, or twin, if those lots are big enough. But when you combine it, you get kind of the full benefit of the first 4,000 square foot of that big lot, but you get like 5% of the additional square footage of those other two lots. So you can't really increase your multifamily house square footage in terms of ground footprint much beyond the single-family home that could have gone on one of those 3 lots. So I just want to make sure.
Sure, and I think
it's just guidance for all of us and for everyone else who's reading the code. Like, dig deeper than the map color, and especially look at the lot usage table that's in there. I think it's a very useful guide to understanding what the real restrictions are when you see a color.
One of the things we discussed at the President's Chat on Thursday night was how if someone, let's say money was no object,
sure,
and combining multiple lots to build a house, yes, you could combine, say, 3 lots to build a house that is bigger than what you could have built on that first lot. But you also would take that area of the neighborhood where that happened and really dramatically increase the amount of green space.
Yeah,
right.
Because you would have a house that, while large, is has a lot of yard. A lot of yard. And if someone wanted to do that because it didn't matter to them whether it was profitable or not, they could do it.
Yeah.
And in which case, really, it wouldn't be such maybe a terrible result. We have to allow them to do something with their property, and that kind of comes from Pennsylvania law and the limits that we can operate in this zoning code. I don't know, we don't need to get into this whole thing.
No, I just thought
it's very well stated. Anybody have anything else?
We took out the noise control part as out because of our own ordinance, or no?
No, it's in.
No.
It's in. It's in. Here we go.
Our solicitor is looking at the noise control ordinance language in the draft to see if we need to make a further correction given our recent passage of ordinance 991 tonight.
I'm just looking under noise control, which is 304 performance standards for specific uses. I thought there was more in that previously regarding.
I'm sorry, I can't remember.
Regarding time.
Here's what's in the current draft that is in front of us. Go up to it. 124.304E4B refers to the table found below the text. The table shows the permitted noise level and designated octave bands along lot boundaries. The restricted times noted in the table
they are on the table.
Were changed from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. From 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 9 p.m. That is more restrictive. And in the adjacent header box for the times were changed from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. through 8 a.m. So quiet hours, using a generic term, would be 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. These times were expanded in an effort to more accurately reflect resident schedules and a desire for a more restricted noise ordinance, more restrictive noise ordinance.
Well, the only comment I would have then to that is I believe one of the last changes that we made in this new ordinance was dealing with a change when daylight savings time came along to add that an extra hour.
To reflect the difference between the time of day and the hours that the sun is up.
That's right.
Correct. So that would need to be reflected as well.
Is that something you think we could do tonight?
I believe it's something that we can just say that it be reflected to
ordinance 991.
Right.
Exactly.
So to kind of cross out these two headers and say times, or the times where these apply are defined by ordinance 991.
Or to say that the ordinance will be amended to comply with the provisions of 991, and then we would then know what would be going in here, and that would be enough consistency.
Okay.
To move forward.
Okay.
It's more of a style choice.
Okay.
I would prefer not to cite to other ordinances. It's good to have it there so you can see what it is.
Okay.
But the change distinctly would be to add an additional hour during daylight savings time to what is stated under noise control.
So what I have recorded so far, I'll make sure I'm not missing anything. Bob suggested additional restrictions on uses on his uses chart that he passed around on conditional use, for conditional use for civic institutions. We decided that we would like the family unit to be defined as four unrelated individuals, and to remove the times explicitly in that section regarding noise and reference the rules put forward in ordinance 991.
Or to have the ordinance reflect the times in 991.
Okay. Was there something else that was on the
The
table?
last little thing that was the rear yard
The fence.
fence.
Oh, thank you.
Actually, just read that, and I think it says what you're intending.
I think so, but
It says, I believe it, I just read that, I think it actually says what Bob is asking for it to say. That you are allowed a 6-foot fence in your rear yard if your rear yard abuts a sidewalk. If it abuts a road, you're only allowed a 3-foot high fence. And I think it's a safety, visibility and safety at corners. When if the property goes all the way to the road and it's a corner, there's no way for an automobile to see. It's a blind spot. Is that correct, Sean?
I'm sorry, I don't recall the.
Okay, sorry. I'm gonna find it and read it to you.
Let's take our time.
And it's actually, I think this is right out of our current fencing ordinance.
Councilor Richmond, while he's looking for the fences, you had a suggestion?
I have it.
I have a suggestion that we actually put in the correct Narberth Borough Council and Planning Commission members. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Could you write up a modification and pass it out?
Can you pass it to me?
Cross out and overwrite, and I'll make it part of the.
On the way over, can I see it?
Yeah, this is my copy, so I can verbally say it, it's easier because this is the only thing I have to work from right
Go
now.
ahead.
I'm just, obviously, I would
In no small measure, we're adding
me.
Councilor Richmond.
But
Okay.
also, I guess we're dating this March 2016, and I'm not sure why we're putting in previous council members, but not all of them, and why we left out some, and in other
Should we
words.
just do current?
Yeah,
That's
why don't we do
typical
current planning and
Thank you.
borough council members? That's my suggestion.
So there would be 6 of us.
There would be 6.
Okay. Fences and walls. 124.606.C.3.A was expanded and now reads sides and rear yard fences or walls may be up to 6 feet in height, except where they abut a street. The height shall not exceed 3 feet. The new text was added because the provision originally lacked the maximum height limit for side or rear yard fences or walls when they abut a street. And I believe the concern is one for vehicular visibility.
Right. But I think
Street.
Councilor Redbright was actually advocating the opposite, which was a higher fence abutting the street for more privacy. Is that what you were saying?
Even when there's not a sidewalk?
Yeah, so like if you go down Rockland, you'll see almost every house, as I said before, has a high backyard fence for privacy factor, and that there's no sidewalk there.
Maybe you could amend that where you would only have that restriction, within a corner. It's a corner.
Or maybe even where it obstructs, because we have a site line.
I think we should talk to the person who made the amendment, find out why they did that.
He's reading, right? He's reading.
Just decide what you want, and we'll put it in the document.
I mean, I'm fine with it the way it is, but I'm fine with what you want.
Yeah, just do that, and then I don't even know if we have to put except where it affects the sight line of the vehicle.
Which would be that the office, with the traffic engineer, to make a determination.
That's the best. Really.
What do you think about that?
That would be sufficient.
Okay, so to amend, rather than saying 3 feet for property lines that abut a street directly with no sidewalk, it would be, what height are you looking for, Bob?
I think it just put side or rear fences or walls may be up to 6 feet in height. Just
6
leave it
feet.
at that. And then except where where the borough engineer feels they affect the traffic sight line.
Okay. Is there a consensus on that?
It's fine.
Yes. Okay.
Just trying to keep people from being non-conforming. President.
I agree. There was another item that was like that. There wasn't a showstopper for anybody when we talked about it last week, but there's been a fair amount of public comment on it. I think it was also one of those like 5149 kind of planning commission discussions, and that was the porch enclosures, provided that there was still visibility into the porch. How do we want to handle that? That's a similar kind of change, I think, in that it's not going to really mess with the guts of the code, and I don't think there's a lot of controversy about it, but it could probably use a little more feedback and definition than what you guys just talked about.
We need a whole package of standards for that. I think it's a future amendment.
Right. I think we talked about that the other night,
They're
that
fresh
it's a
with the
future
topic. They
amendment.
could probably do it in the next 3 months
Yeah.
or something, because they discussed it as nauseum. So
It's sort of short-term
Future
focus,
amendment.
future amendment.
And I think that gives council the opportunity in its instructions to the planning commission to issue kind of where we are feeling it should go, and then to create standards based around that, not necessarily kind of a blind, tell us what you think.
And that gives us another chance, say 2 or 3 months out, to have a package of, if there are other minor things that we see, they can go with the front porch standards.
Does everyone agree? Yes. Councilor Richmond would like to do something about it now.
Well, I guess what I'm hearing is nobody wants to make any major changes to this plan. Not only now to pass it, but really what you're saying is ever. You know, and I guess my biggest problem with this is just the overall concept that one of the things people like about Narberth is that it has a defined downtown, Main Street-ish kind of thing. By expanding commercial and mixed use beyond that, where you're going to change that. So that's a big change. That's not a little change. That's pretty much the opposite of whatever you would think form-based means. The other thing that just, when I also think about aging in place, when you think about concepts like...
Could you just, I can hear you, but if
you can hear me. I don't know if this is good water. I hope this helps. Does it? No?
Take it.
Okay, does this help at all? Okay. So a couple of my big picture problems with this, which aren't minor changes at all, have to do with defining density from the train track and then getting lighter as it goes out. Because by definition, Montgomery Avenue is a major thoroughfare, and at the very least should have density, a dual density from that place as well. And on top of that, why Windfield was not considered a place where you would have density. I mean, wouldn't want to suggest it, but it's a question looking at this from a conceptual point of view. I started off saying, we talk about aging in place, but people, once you retire, you're not necessarily taking the train into Center City every day for work. That's first of all. So why would we define density from the train track in the first place just makes no sense to me at all. And then on top of that, a lot of people don't necessarily work in the city anyway. They work elsewhere in the boroughs or in some other place where they're driving. We don't have an infrastructure, we don't have a great infrastructure in the Philadelphia suburbs for commuting, say, from Monaco to Bucks County. So you're not getting on the train. So I think defining density from the train, looking its way out, just is wrong-headed, and it doesn't make any sense to me. The other thing I would say, going back to wanting to save these civic institutions, once you say that you're going to create the option of mixed use, you automatically bump the price up of the property, which will, in some cases, if not all cases, eliminate the possibility of someone converting those to strictly residential units. You've now priced that out of the market by opening it up for commercial development. People are going to pay more, and I think in some cases that you've seen that, where somebody might think a property can be zoned eventually for commercial use, so they pay more, they get other people out of the market, and that's now the new settlement. So you're not going to have, you can't walk that back. You're going, essentially, you're saying non-bar civic institutions are going to be eligible for just residential use going forward. If you want to change that, then you're going back to what was objected to before, which is spot zoning, because now we're taking each case in particular as it comes up, which is, so I think just overall, there are some things that I don't think are minor tweaks. I think they're major problems. I also object to the initial language of this, which just throws the word urban around every other word, urban this, urban that. The intent, the authority, and the applicability. The intent is to maintain the urban form present and mostly intact in the borough. And I think that that's just disingenuous. People didn't move here because they wanted to live in Center City or Brooklyn. They moved here because it's not that. They wanted to live in something that was different. And if you think about, so this is where I'm coming from. I'm not so sure this is ever going to be good for Narberth. I think the biggest problem that I have at this point, where we sit now, is that we actually never asked Montgomery County Planning Commission to break this down for us in pieces, that we could actually go through it with the community, doing a massive community change with your zoning. And I think it would have been very nice if we had that at least as an option in front of us. What can we pass that we agree on, do it in pieces. It is a 104-page document. Maybe it should be 204 pages. Maybe it deserves to have that kind of attention in each of its changes and parts. And maybe the community would have appreciated the time to go through that. I know I would have. And I think that, you know, because the church took up so much time, we spent all that time on an ordinance we didn't pass, ultimately. That could have been spent on this. It could have even given us an extra 2 months just to preserve the properties we do want to save from tear downs. So I feel like there's just some kind of, we're just missing what's important, and it concerns me greatly. So I feel like I don't have the tools before me to vote what needs to be done to preserve the buildings we say we want to preserve. All of them. That's what I thought.
I think everyone's had a chance to speak. Councilor Whitworth, you had indicated you might make an amendment to the motion to discuss.
Yeah, no, I'm going to address your comments when we get into the discussion part of this. But I'm going to make a motion that we put forward this draft of the form-based code advertising towards approval. So,
okay, and who seconded that motion to discuss it originally?
I think it might have been me.
Okay. All right, so let's have the amended motion on the table, which I will read back to move the form-based zoning code draft version 4.1, which was sent out to councilors this afternoon, to a hearing with the following amendments to that draft. One is the uses chart, which will be entered into the record and is being handed down to me. Yes. Amendment 1. The second is to redefine the number of unrelated individuals that can live under a single roof to 4. The definition of family to 4. To take the references to times of day that are in the noise ordinance component of the form-based zoning code draft and use your language, reference them to ordinance 991.
I believe it's better to use the language that's in the ordinance that we just passed, put into the form-based.
So we will make that change before it's reprinted as a document. Regarding a fence, that a fence abutting a sidewalk or a street can be as high as 6 feet unless determined by the borough's traffic engineer to impair vehicular sightlines. To make an update to the list of council members and planning commission members to reflect those who are in those positions as of this day. And that's it. That's what's on the table. We've had a discussion. We can have more now that we've made an amendment. You'd like to say something?
No, I think I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Marlene. It's gone through a 4, 6, 8-year process, so I think a lot of these concerns and thoughts have been addressed by the Planning Commission and the community. I also think that the speed of these changes is relatively minor, what will happen, but you're absolutely right. This is not to keep Narberth. This is to change Narberth, and I don't think it's the change, I feel the changes are minor and soft enough that they will ultimately result in a fairly good thing, recognizing it's a different world. I agree about Montgomery Avenue. I mean, that's, why would you not want, you're going to put apartments anywhere. You've got a bus that goes right by Montgomery Avenue. You've got easy outlets for vehicle traffic that's already going there. Same with like the Windale corridor. Anywhere should get a, house converted to 4 unit versus 2. There's plenty of parking up there. Is it in the character of what's there now? No. But his changing my next door neighborhood to 2 units in the character there now, not necessarily. I think we're